start. So in this serverless world, I think this title really speaks to the atmosphere, fast and furious. And, it's great to see demos, but I know you're really keen to get from zero to serverless, just like Abby and I spoke on Friday night while I was having my dinner, just about to fly out. Can we show Linux Kit at the Open Source Summit, at Moby Summit? I was like, well, let's have a go. And it worked. Now, this is something that people sometimes take for granted, which is, what does serverless mean? Well, when we talk about serverless OpenFaaS, we're really talking about an architectural pattern that encompasses much more than a billing model. Now, we used to build our systems with 3-tier monoliths, maybe your MTA project. They were kind of large, slow to deploy. They were really hard to test, and we released them every 6 months. Microservices were the next step in the evolution. We broke those down. They had fewer constrained responsibilities, and they were actually a little bit harder to manage. And we have tools like Istio that have come on board. Now, functions are the final step in that evolution. They're much, much smaller. They only do one thing, and they do it really well. They take an input, they process some data, and produce an output. But the key thing is they do not replace your other code. They work best alongside it, and they'll integrate systems together. An example might be responding to payment gateway information, or logging and auditing. Okay. Now, this is the CNCF landscape, and OpenFaaS, really happy to announce this, has just been added into the serverless event-based section. And this kind of shows you what is the direction of technology that we should go in. What is cloud native? So it's really great to be on there. Now, one of the things that probably belongs in that space is AWS Lambda. This is a cloud-based technology. How it works is you create a zip file with all your dependencies, upload it through a web form, and then you can invoke it. And if you come and see me later, I'll show you an Alexa demo where we can trigger the code. Okay. Now, you can actually replace that Lambda function with OpenFaaS and Docker containers, whether that's on Kubernetes or Swarm, and it will work exactly the same. And why would that matter? Well, you should be able to run your code for however long you want, write it in whatever language an OS suits your team, which might be Windows, might be .NET if you're doing MTA, and on whatever platform you like. In the keynote, we heard about taking serverless and making it, I guess, portable, right? Running at the edge, not being locked in. A little bit about use cases. So serverless for OpenFaaS can run pretty much anything, like we saw with Chad. So a Docker container is your basic primitive. But there's some more interesting use cases around machine learning. I'm going to show you very quickly what Finian did to colorize images. Some of you have seen his bot that turns black and white pictures to color. It's just 2 functions. Batch jobs are very important. Running things like pay runs, integrations, maybe you're cleaning up your Elasticsearch cluster. Image and video conversion is very easy. In fact, you can take ImageMagick or FFmpeg and just make that a function without writing any code. Mobile backends would be something like Alexa, maybe the Twilio example we saw in a keynote. And then I'm going to show you a chatbot we're using to help our project. So a little bit about the story so far. I was struggling with Lambda. I kind of learned it because I wanted to use Alexa, I wanted to build out skills, and I found it very slow to iterate. I had to deal with IAM codes. I was a Docker captain, and I thought there must be a better way. I know Node, I know Docker containers, and heard about the DockerCon Cool Hacks contest, and submitted an entry, and with some help from Docker's engineering team in Cambridge, actually won that and got to present on the main stage. But it didn't stop there. I carried on going, and lots of other people have come along for the journey. Now, this was the top trending project on GitHub, basically, for about a day. I'm not really sure how that happened, but it was absolutely awesome. We've had some accolades from the industry, recently featured by InfoWorld, along with Docker CE and Kubernetes of winning best cloud computing software. Over 7,000 stars, that's 700 per month since we began in January. people are using this in production, and I'm really excited to say that we support Kubernetes natively with actual primitives. Nomad, Hyper have built their own backends for OpenFaaS that are completely swappable, and we also have support for cattle. So I'm really proud to go and speak about OpenFaaS, but also to speak about the community. Now, I know everyone on this slide. I know exactly what their strengths and weaknesses are and what they've been able to bring to the project. And it's great how people like Quay have been able to come along one day and say, let's have a Helm chart to make it easier to deploy. Finian has the sunglasses on over on the far side. I don't know if he's here. We'll talk a bit about his bot in a second. That's 1,000 commits, 45 contributors, and a lot of forks. Okay? And it wouldn't be the same without this vibrant community behind it. I think this is one of the key differentiators. All these projects have a CLI. Most of them use Docker in some way, but this is the Moby Summit, which is about community. Now, it's a cloud-native project. Walking through from the top, we have an API gateway. That's written in Golang. All of your functions are deployed there and called there, scaled up as they need to be. The function watchdog is embedded into each container. It's a shim or a sidecar that allows any process to become serverless without knowing about HTTP. Prometheus underpins it, and it gives us cloud-native metrics. We can build a dashboard, find out how the system's going, and then with Swarm or Kubernetes, we can actually input those metrics back in and say auto-scale when they hit a certain threshold. Now, the key difference here is we're not just making use of Kubernetes and Docker Swarm. We're actually using the API to take fault tolerance, HA, DNS, everything to the next level. So if you were to invoke a function right now to colorize an image, this is what Finian showed, you can actually tweak to colorize bot a bit later on. Your black and white image will come over to the gateway, the binary bytes. We will invoke your function synchronously, you get your colored image, and it comes back to you. You have an asynchronous model as well, and you always have one replica of the function there, ready to receive work. So what happens under the hood? Well, we have this function watchdog I spoke about. The function watchdog is listening on port 8080. When a call comes in, this is a bit like CGI. We fork a process, we take the headers and pipe them in through environmental variables, and the body goes in through standard in. The result of the fork process goes back out through standard out, okay? And it comes back to you. So let's deploy this in 60 seconds on Kubernetes. And things just got a whole lot easier for us. So thank you, Docker. And let's see. Let's get everything in. That's it. We've got our pods, we've got our deployments. And we'll just go over to the dashboard now. When you hit the dashboard, there's no functions in the Kubernetes stack, so we'll run some in. This is a sample YAML file. It groups your functions together. And I'm now deploying to that remote gateway. And those functions just been created, just like that. And they'll pop up in a second. So this is an example of how OpenFaaS can be powerful. We've taken SHA-SUM, which you know is just a utility as old as time. I can hit invoke, and the body was passed in, executed, and we've got the result there. You can do that with anything, even a 30-year-old C++ binary. But at this open source event, at the Moby Summit, we want to talk about open source. We want to talk about governance and running projects. So I'm now going to just do a pull request, and going back to that chatbot idea. And has anyone contributed to the Docker project? Okay, it actually has quite a long contributing guide and some rules that you have to follow. One of them is to sign off your commits. So that pull request I've just done won't have signed my commit. And there should be some feedback coming in from our maintainer bot. Let's see if there's one from earlier. So it's been triggered, and it's applied a label and told us, well, hang on, we can't accept that. Can you go off and re-sign it? That helps us a lot. With how many contributors did I say? 40 45 odd, and more every day. This is really important. And it also allows us to scale out permissions without giving people write access. So I can say something like, Derek, add label proposal, submit that, and he'll do that for me. And the contributors in the project are gradually gaining more and more permissions and building upon that. So that might be really useful for you. So you might be wondering, how would you write your own function? Again, you can use a Docker file, or you can use a template. A template's available for all the common languages you'd expect. This is how we'd do one for Python. So simply combining a best practices template with multi-stage builds, Alpine Linux, and non-root user with your code. So you only have to manage your handler. It can be checked into Git, can be put through CI/CD, vulnerability scanning, and it's pushed to your favorite registry. When you get a couple together, it ends up looking like this, and then you can do your configuration. At ADP, I have to work through a HTTP proxy. If you've not used it, it means that you have to configure every container to have the variables. So here I've added in a proxy. We could add any secrets that we need here as well, like access tokens. Now I want to show you very quickly. I'm not going to ask you to start the project, but you can if you want. But basically, if you were to do that now, GitHub will send an event to the API gateway for the fan club function. That will then, it's written in Python, will invoke a getAvatar with the name of your URL. We'll download the bytes into memory and then post them to a Polaroid transformation. Once we've transformed the picture, we'll then upload it to Twitter. And it's just an example to show you how it can build a pipeline. And something perhaps more practical might be when you get your product reviewed, you see how many stars it has, analyze whether it's positive or negative language, and maybe raise a Jira ticket. Now, if you want to try that later on, or you can even try it now, OpenFaaS, FaaS, and I'll just show you a few that we got in earlier. So you can see the transformation that's been applied there. And Finian was able to kind of take the function that I'd written, take the kind of approach, and then very quickly get to colorizing images with his bot. And just to show you a couple of those for interest, here's some of the ones that we've had over the conference. And I like this one in particular. This is from Ansel Adams, famous fine art photographer from the US. And the color's actually pretty good. So if you get time, check out their talk and see how they've put it together with OpenFaaS. Now, it's always important to know that something's being used by people if you're thinking about deploying something or doing a POC. There are a number of people on here that I can speak to you about later, and we also have many integrations with big projects. So come and speak to me at the BOF or contact us online, and we can talk to you about these. So what's next for the project? Well, I think this is such a wide landscape, and there's so many options, but we really want to be focused on delivering what we've said we'll do, and for the users that we have. Now, on a technical level, we're going to explore multi-tenancy. I think it's something that people keep asking for. Can we run an OpenFaaS cloud where people can just come along and experiment with this? John McCabe from Puppet has built out an analytics dashboard for us. It's really good, and it's not live yet, but it allows us to see how people are using the system through the CLI. It's great data. If you run an open source project, you're involved in one, getting feedback is just what you're offered. So this is a way that Docker is already using to elicit feedback, and I think it could be really useful. An AWS connector, again, could be very good for us because you look at how Lambda is so integrated, and you come to a on-prem solution. It's like, well, how do you start integrating? Okay, it's very important. We may do that through Kafka. Scaling to zero, technically, I think will be very fun. It's not necessarily really high on the priority, but we've got some ideas of how to do that already. I was kind of hacking on it with Tonis earlier. And then we want to have a really good set of documentation. Again, John is helping out with that, and that will launch in, I guess, a week or two. But right now, if you come over to the repository, we have a whole list of guides, and you can just get started, as I said, in 60 seconds. Okay, thank you very much.